So in Genesis, we talk about Leah and how Jacob loves his second wife Rachel way more than Leah, and how that kind of affects how she is portrayed in her story. So even though Leah was the first wife, she definitely does not feel Jacob's love for her, but sees that he loves Rachel way more. And she kind of shows this by the way she names her children, and I thought that was very interesting of how she names her children and how the names change. So the first child she names, "Because the Lord has seen my misery, surely my husband will love me now." And her second son, "Because the Lord has heard that I am not loved, he has given me another child." And her third, even now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I bore him three sons." And I think it's very interesting that she's still calling to God and praising him for of course her children, but she's also wishing for that love from her husband Jacob. But then on her fourth child, it kind of switches directions. She names her son after "This time I will praise the Lord," and it kind of shows a shift of that she's accepted that she kind of isn't going to be loved by Jacob as much, but she's turning more to God. And even when she gives her servant to Jacob, she names the first child "What good fortune," and the second "How happy I am, the woman will call me happy." And I think she named the two children from the servant this way because in Old Testament times, the main purpose of wives was to bear children for their husbands. And I think Leah, she steps away from wanting the love of her husband and more of the role she has as being a wife and a mother and bearing and giving Jacob children. And you see this with her sixth and seventh sons, or her fifth and sixth sons. "God has rewarded me for giving my servant to God." And her sixth son, she names, "God has presented me with precious gifts. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I bore him six sons." And I like the use of the word honor because it kind of shows that she doesn't really care too much about being loved, but more about being honored by her husband because she is doing her cultural role. She's given him six sons, so at least she can have some recognition, even if it's not love. And I do feel compassion for Leah, especially in today's day and age. As society, women are way more than just wives that will bear children for their husbands. They're way more than that. But in the Old Testament, that was the cultural role of women, and it still is now, but it's not only that. More in the Old Testament, it was only that. And you kind of have empathy for Leah, and you feel more grateful for now, I think, because we're not crying out to God about only bearing children. We have way more freedom now. And some might see this and say God doesn't love Leah because her husband doesn't love her, but I think it shows, one, the sinful nature of Jacob, and I think you can look on the story and think, as maybe as a male, of what you shouldn't do to your wives, because, obviously Leah is in misery at times, and definitely in the beginning, but I think it also shows that Leah, she relies on God, and God sees that, and he gives her six sons, and it shows that God will care for Leah and give her what she needs to excel in those Old Testament times. And I think Leah has a lot of power here. She is the first wife, and she has her children first, so her children will be the heirs in Jacob's lineage, which is a lot of power back in the Old Testament. Now it's not as much, but it definitely is in the Old Testament. And I think this whole story is to show that God will always take care of his people. It might not always seem like it. He has plans, and we can always see it, but they always do work out. And Leah, she was able to give her sons, many sons, and she stayed close to God, and he was close to her. And I think it shows that if we call upon God, he will be there for, even back in the Old Testament to even now. And I think that's a very powerful message and a really good story in the Bible that is portrayed here.